Speaking freedom, giving you the answers to be free. Be free.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's performance is about to begin.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Today's show of Speaking Freedom TV, Journey of Freedom, we have our special guest. Of course, I am your host, Dr. Kaci. Our special guest is Jack Gregory, the accidental journalist. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Jack.
Hi, so it's great to be here. I am a writer, journalist. I never intended to be that. I'll talk a little bit about that later. I always wanted to be an actor. But when I got sober, God led me in a way where he thought I should become a voice for other people. So that's what I did. And I accidentally became a journalist, hence the accidental journalist.
Mm-hmm. So what led you into journalism? Like what was the things that was like, okay, this is going to be the path that I pursue?
Well, I mean, I've always had an affinity for words. I've always had a big love for words. As a kid, I couldn't read or write. I didn't learn to read or write until I was 21 in prison. And I always said that if I could read or write, I'd be dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
But I had many years of addiction and on and off. And when I got sober, I was at church and people were praying for me, and there were people coming to me that I'd never even met saying, you're going to be a voice for the people that are broken. You're going to be a voice for those that don't have a voice. So I prayed about it, and then in 2016 I wrote my first book, A Personal Apocalypse. 2017 I spent late 2016 I spent 6 months working with escapees of human trafficking, sexual slavery and exploitation, in which I had some revelations, and I unlocked some memories and feelings that I'd kept back for a long time. I was trafficked as a child, and I decided that I was going to become a voice for those that had the courage to speak but didn't have the courage to put their name to it. So I decided that I was going to tell their story. So I wrote a book called Between the Streetlights and the Red Lights. And it's the stories of these people that have escaped trafficking. And as I was doing that, I was working on my own trauma and learning to deal with my own past.
So how did you get put into trafficking? How did you get trafficked? Like how did that start for you?
All right, okay. So I have to go back to when I were okay. So I was born in Scotland in 1977, and I was brought over to England by my mother and her sisters and brother, and I was at 16 months old. I was taken away from her by social services. My mum had some mental health issues, and as did some of her brother and sisters, but she had some mental health issues. I was taken away and I was put into care. Of course, I didn't know any of this, so I just grew up a quiet kid in a mining town in Yorkshire, in the north of England, and this was during the 80s when our Prime Minister, in her extreme wisdom, decided that it was cheaper to buy coal from France and South Africa than it was to mine it in our own country. So a lot of the mines shut down and a lot of the towns became ostrich. And they started to fail. The towns around them, the market towns, they started to fail. but I was brought up in a, I was lucky. My dad was a railway man, on the civil engineer for British Rail. My mum was a social worker, um, an adult social worker. So they brought me up, and I was always a quiet kid and a shy kid. Um, the one that was a bit messed up. But on my 8th birthday, I'd had a really nice day of pop and crisps and tea and cake, and they bought me a wigwam for the back garden, and it was brilliant. And then I was sat on my mum's knee later that day, and she said, "We love you, don't you?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah." And then I saw this tear in her eye, and she said, "Well, you're not actually. Well, you are ours now, but you weren't. You're adopted, and this is what happened." And I guess for most people, knowing that they've got a loving family that's taken them on, that would be a good thing, a positive thing. But for me, that's when the lights went out. So I'm an 8-year-old with an inferiority complex. I'm an 8-year-old that's having a existential crisis. I didn't know what to do, so I retreated into my own world, into my own stories in my head, I learned to mimic people. I learned to do different voices and accents. I learned to lie very, very well, because I thought, well, if I can't be who I thought I was, I'll be whoever I want to be. So for many years, I never showed my true face.
Is that why you wanted to be an actor?
Yeah, I mean, when I was at school, at middle school, there were teachers that I was always the entertainer. I always said I was going to be in films, and I, I always planned to do that. But being a kid in Yorkshire, that's not really possible. There's a famous guy, a couple of famous guys from our town. One of them's an actor, a British actor. Well known in Britain, but kids from my town didn't really go off anywhere.
Right.
So, and because I couldn't read all right, I always had a head for facts and general knowledge and things like that, and I could take in things that I was interested in, and I would hyper focus. I now know that to be a neurodivergency, but I could hyper focus on things. So I was sent to a special school. There was no really such thing as dyslexia, or it was, but it wasn't really well known. People weren't really given that diagnosis. I was just seen as a bit thick, a bit stupid. So I was sent to a special school, and this school didn't do anything academically, really. The only things I left school with, apart from a complex, was a certificate on changing a fuse in a plug, a certificate on riding a 50cc moped, a certificate on answering a private telephone, a certificate on counting to 100.
So they kind of made you worker bee. It's like it seemed like a production type of school where you become a worker bee versus.
Yeah. I mean, it manual labor, but I really wasn't any good at that. I was always in my own head. But because I had this thing about me, and I would lie. There were certain adults within that situation, within the school situation, within the social service situation that was around it, that then took it upon themselves to begin to sexually abuse me and tell me that, well, everybody knows you're a liar, so nobody's going to ever going to believe you, whatever you say. So you might as well just accept it. And I did. And at least, or I thought, at least when I was being abused, I was being seen, and I was getting attention. And it was keeping them off another kid. And I went through like that, you know, for a few years. I was being like sent off to like the army youth team, or scout camps and things like that, and different colleges and stuff, for me to be abused by the adults.
So do they, when you get to different places, were they just seeking you out? What, like,
they knew who I was. I was being passed around from teacher to teacher. They all knew each other. They were all friends. They were all part of this sort of
the circle of those pedophiles, basically.
Yeah.
So when you say trafficking, that you mean literally they passed you along throughout the course of your duration there.
Yep, for their own sexual gratification. You know, and they
I'm
would
sorry
give
to
me
hear that
things.
happened.
Sorry.
I said I'm sorry to hear that happened to you.
Well, I mean, yeah, it messed me up for a long time. It's only in the past sort of 2 or 3 years, 4 years, that I've really been working on myself and learning about it's not my fault, and learning that it's all on them and it wasn't on me, and things like that. Just down to things like it was not normal, and I didn't deserve it, no matter how much of a liar that I was. But
Yeah, right. Because you're a child. No child deserves to be used and abused in that way. So how
exactly.
did this play into your book writing? I know you said you wrote books that were specifically about it. How many books have you written total?
So I'm now working on my fourth book. I supplied poetry for 3 other books. I wrote my poetic memoirs, A Personal Apocalypse. I wrote Between the Streetlights and the Red Lights. I co-wrote a book about a man by the name of Paul Massey with his daughters. He was slain in 2015. He was murdered by a hitman. He was seen as somewhat of a gangland figure in Manchester, the Salford area, and I got involved with his daughters. In 2017, I lost my niece, my 2-day-old niece, to murder to her father. My sister was in bed. She'd had a difficult birth. He was looking after the 2 children. One of them was 3 years old, so it's nothing that he hadn't done before. But he took it on himself to. She wouldn't stop crying. He said she wouldn't stop crying. He said he shook her, but the things that came out after, she passed away at 5 days old. She was totally brain damaged. She'd got broken ribs, broken arm, a broken foot. He'd done so much damage.
From just shaking her.
Well, he wasn't just shaking her; he beat her senseless.
Oh, he completely lost it.
He lost control. He punched her. He slapped her. He pinched her, and he said he was trying to get her to stop, but
none of those things would make a baby stop crying.
No, exactly. And he, obviously, she'd stopped crying and she went limp because she was brain damaged. When my sister came downstairs from her nap, she saw the baby was limp and called the ambulance. The ambulance came. He said he didn't know what had happened. The ambulance came. They said that this baby has been shaken and shaken and shaken. The police came and arrested both him and my sister. My sister was let out quite quickly because it was proved where she was. It was proved she was in bed. She'd spoken to my cousin on the phone, on like this, on Messenger and stuff. And Yeah, so he was arrested. He admitted what he did. Um, and then he was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 10 years. He was in prison less than a year when he was murdered by his cellmate in the middle of the night over a relatively small drug debt, a £20 drug debt, I believe it was.
But
Uh,
they don't take kindly to child murderers, rapists, and different things like that. From what my understanding of family members that have gone to prison and gotten out, or just survived prison in general, certain crimes are looked at and viewed different. So people have a very like short fuse when it comes to people. Some people.
yeah, but the man that murdered him was in for raping a 60-year-old woman, I believe.
Mm.
So he was not much better, to be honest.
Right, right, right.
But it took a year for us to have the funeral, and yeah, he was hard. And one of the lead elders from our church, he took me home for the funeral, and after the funeral, I came out to light a cigarette, and his mum um, put her arms around me and gave me a hug and said, "Thanks for coming." And I broke. I absolutely broke. And I went and sat in the car, and I cried for a little bit, and then I got hit with this realization of there's a realization that comes with sudden pain when you're so angry and you hit something and you hurt yourself quite badly. Your body goes into like a shock, and you just go calm. And that's kind of what happened. And but Chris the elder said to me, what's going on? And I said, well, I've got to forgive him because it's going to tear me apart, and I'm going to end up back in violence, and I don't want to do that. I said that doesn't mean that I have to like what he did. That doesn't mean that I excuse what he did, but I have to forgive him for my own mental health. Um, and I have to forgive his mum.
Mm-hmm.
And she'd not really done anything wrong, but I hated her, and I hated his dad, and I hated his family.
Right, because they're a part of why he is whoever, whatever, and whoever, however he has been.
Yeah, but we were robbed of answers. We we
Mm-hmm.
we we had questions that we really needed to ask, and we couldn't.
Right.
The man that murdered him, John Westland, he robbed of us answers. Robbed us of
Mm-hmm.
answers. Um, so there were these questions that still today and probably for the rest of our life will go unanswered. And it was preying on that and other things. I'd tried to be an actor at one point, and I didn't succeed. I wrote a film that was going to do very well, and I lost it due to my addiction. I signed it away for 4 years. I was tricked out of signing it away.
Oh man.
So by
The
these,
entertainment industry is very gruesome when it comes to tricking people out of their rights and ownership.
yeah, I mean, this is a point where I was having a breakdown. My marriage had ended. I pretty much lost everything within my addiction. I'd ended up homeless, street homeless, addicted to crack cocaine again. I'd managed 10 years sober. And then I just ended up back on the gear. And I'd written this film, and I'd got involved with some of the local producers, and I'd back in 2009, I toured it all around the country, and a lot of people had seen it and they were going to make it, and it never happened. So we decided to make it ourselves. I was on this self-destructive path, and I ended up getting drunk. I was going to be, I was acting in the film as well, playing one of the characters that I'd written, and I turned up on set and I was drunk. I was, I was addicted to a lifestyle. I was addicted to women. I was moving from relationship to relationship. I was cheating on every woman that I was ever with. Sort of addicted to sex and that sort of life. And I turned up drunk on set, and they said to me, "Can you just sign this actor's release form?" And I signed the whole film away for 4 years. Um, I got that back a few years ago, and that's been shelved now. It probably will never get made, but
of course,
I'd given up on wanting to be an actor, because it was causing me so much pain. I got sober on the 27th of June 2014. I'd fallen asleep in a crack house. On the 26th of June 2014, I was sat in a crack house. And I said, this 10 o'clock at night, and I said, "God, I can't do this anymore. I don't even know if you exist at this point anymore. But if you do, please either take away this thirst, this hunger for drugs, or take my life, because I can't live like this anymore." That was about 10 o'clock at night. And no word of a lie, I fell asleep on crack cocaine, which is pretty much a miracle in itself. And I woke up somewhere between 2 and 4 minutes past midnight on the 27th of June 2014. And I haven't used the day since. I'd started going to a food bank. The woman there, Jo, she took a liking to me, took pity on me. She would, she served me coffee with a smile on these mornings that I would go to the coffee mornings at that church, and she would, despite being told not to, she took me out for a meal, and she bought me food, and she bought me tobacco, and
she was nice to you.
She was really nice to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I married her in 2019. We got together around about September, October of that year, and I moved in. And then around this time, 8 years ago, 2015, I was taken into hospital with tuberculosis. And I had a complete and utter psychological breakdown. I'd become convinced that I'd given the world this super virulent strain of tuberculosis. I became convinced that I'd poisoned the world and brought about the apocalypse. I'd become convinced that everybody that I'd loved had died, and they were being either used as puppets or they were being taken over by doppelgangers. And I was very, very sick for quite a few weeks. I wouldn't.
And that was all a part of the tuberculosis.
Tuberculosis,
because some medical diseases cause mental breakdown, like some of the side effects of having certain diseases and sicknesses.
It had been coming for a long time, to be honest. Like I said, I've suffered with mental illness my whole life.
Okay.
And I'd had breakdown upon breakdown. But it was all the guilt and shame within my life. And the drugs that they were giving me were quite toxic. The drugs to keep me alive. I did die for 4 minutes, and I believe I went to hell for 4 minutes. And when I came back, I got very, very poorly mentally, and that's when the breakdown went into full force. I became convinced that my daughter had died, and she was only about 6 at the time, I guess. And there was a point where I did a Skype call with her, and I was convinced that they were using her as a puppet just to mess with my head. I thought they were poisoning me. It was just so hard. It literally took me to hell and back.
Was that the hardest part of your transitioning to where you are today? Like, what was the most difficult portion of your transition?
I guess that, I guess that whole few weeks in between where I was so poorly, people were coming to pray for my soul because they were told they were going to lose me again at any minute. It was just so hard. I had so much guilt and so much shame. And there was this figure at the end of the bed, pretty much throughout most of it. And it scared me at the start, but then it started to give me sort of peaceful vibes towards the end. And I said, who are you? Just, I need to know who you are. And I had this voice saying, you know who I am? And I said, right, well, then what have I got to do? And he said, you know what you got to do? I said, okay, then. Jesus, I accept you into my life. And this is no word of a lie. I have people on my Facebook with one of the primary nurse that was looking after me. She came in to the room. I'd gone mute at one point. I wouldn't speak to anybody. And when I did, I would only scream at them and try to attack them. I couldn't barely move, let alone sit up. And she walked into the room. I was sat upright in my bed. It was like this darkness had peeled away from my eyes. I could then see back in full HD. I had this rash from my neck to my stomach where I'd taken an adverse reaction to one of these medications. I thought that they'd burned me with acid and they were trying to torture me. And this nurse walked in and she looked at me, and I was sat up in bed, and I smiled and I said, can I have a wash, please? And she went white and she went running out. And then the doctors came in and I started talking to them. I'm saying, what you doing? And, they're saying, you're talking. We were going to, you were going to die. You're dying and you're talking. And I'm like, well, can I have a wash, please? So after they messed about trying to find out what was happening, they brought me in a bowl, and this rash was just burning. And I took this cloth, this sponge out of the thing, and I started washing myself from neck down. And no word of a lie, this rash just started peeling away and disappearing right underneath this cloth sponge, and I'm just wiping it away, and it just disappeared as I washed it away. I managed to get out of bed, and I went into the bathroom. It was the bathroom on the side of the negative pressure room that I was in, and I shaved my own head because my hair had got long and my face was all matted, and it was a lot worse than this. And I had a shave, and I'd cut my hair, and I got back in bed, and they came in and they said it was like a different man. I said, I'm hungry. They got me a sandwich. I managed to eat half the sandwich. My stomach had shrunk seriously. I was 6 stone 6 ounces at the apex of it. So that's about 80 pound, if not less. And I'm 6'1", so I'm not a small guy. And I just, I managed it, and then I started to eat again. Started to build my way up. They said if I hit 8 stone, I could leave. So while I'd been in hospital, I'd got made redundant. I'd had a job. writing policies, and got made redundant. So I got £200 redundancy money. So I said I was spending that on food. So I was eating their food and then going downstairs and 2 or 3 times a day eating meals down in the canteen. And then at night I was getting 2-for-1 pizzas, 14-inch pizzas, one for me and one for the nurses. And I did that every night. And yeah, within a few weeks I got to 8 stone, and I came out of the hospital at 8 stone 3 ounces, I think it was. And I just started getting better and better, and I started working within the church.
How has everything that you've gone through changed you as a person?
The old me died. I'm not that man anymore. I was a violent, selfish, hateful man that was filled with greed and just want for what he couldn't have. I was self-serving, and he died, and I came back a totally different person. I'm not the man that I was. There are things that I did in my life that caused me great shame that I believe contributed to the breakdown. But I had trauma, like I was saying, with the trafficking and the abuse, and I've been told I was adopted, and all these things that were in my head. But I started to work on myself, and then I guess when I got to about 16 months sober, I got asked to go and speak to a director.
Hi, I'm Dr. Kaci. Not your typical clinical doctor. I am an ordained minister, but not your typical minister. I am also a certified life coach, love coach, sex coach, solution focused coach, transformation coach, and more. I have a whole lot of information that I would like to help you grow with. And I hope that soon I can help you be the best you that you can be. Confidence, spirituality, and purpose. That's wholeness, complete.
Who was making a film here in Norfolk where I live. I'd resigned myself never to do a film again, but I went to speak to her. Her name was Joanna Hogg, and she was doing 2 films called The Souvenir and The Souvenir Part 2, back to back, pretty much. And it was about addiction in the 80s. And she needed to speak to somebody that had been through that. So I went and I spoke to her, and she asked me if I would like a part in the film, a small part in the film. This was funded by Martin Scorsese. So how could I say no? So I did that. And not only did I do that, I was asked to consult on both the films, which I did, which led me into my career of consulting. And I've done several TV shows for the Discovery Channel. I played one of your serial killers for Twisted Killers, a guy by the name of John Eric Armstrong, the baby doll killer. For the Discovery Channel. And I just started building my career up like that. And then people were telling me that.
Go ahead. I apologize.
No, that's fine. People were telling me that, there are voices that need help out there. So then I started doing that, and I haven't looked back since. And then COVID hit. On the first lockdown, I suffered a little bit with my mental health. And then the second lockdown in October of 2020, a friend of mine who is a hostage negotiator by trade says to me, "Why don't you start podcasting?" And I said, "What to talk about?" And he said, "Well, you and things that you know about, and give people voices." So I did, and I started my Live and On Drug series. Now I haven't looked back since.
Well, I wanted to say that I am proud of you and congratulations, because just from the short time that you've told me your story, it is very complex. And so many people have gone through nowhere near as many things have you that you've gone through, and they fall off the wagon and they never recover. But you have strength and agility within you. You have a sense of determination that God has given you, and I love that for you and within you, because you could easily give up. I mean, like, that's the easiest thing to do sometimes, and people don't realize that um giving up and quitting, like, everybody does that, but it takes a lot of courage to keep going, to believe in yourself, to see beyond what people try to convince you of, and to really see your true light. And I admire that within you.
Thank you. I didn't always see it. I wasn't. I call myself a hooligan, hooligan, because I spent a lifetime trying to find out who I was. I didn't know who I was, and it's only in the past few years that I've learned to love myself, learned to forgive myself, um, learned to deal with my trauma, learned that when we get to a certain point in our recovery, it is our responsibility to carry that message, to share our story, to give hope, because I went from hopeless to hopeful. And that's the one thing that I have now. I have hope. I have a family. I have children. I have grandchildren. I have a good relationship with my family.
So how is that from where you started, like with your adoptive parents and all of that? Do you still keep in touch with them?
Yeah, yeah.
Were you
You
able
know,
to get over? I think that they probably told you a lot earlier than what you probably should have learned that information. I think that's like one of those things you wait until you're about in your teens, maybe your early teenage years,
I
because at
think,
8 years old, I don't think you're able to really process that healthily.
and I couldn't process that, but I believe it was the court that said that I needed to be told by the time I was 8, and I
Mm,
think they pushed it for as long as they could.
hmm
Um, I had a relationship with my real mum. I have a relationship with my sister and my brother. Um, you know, my relationship with my adopted parents was strained for many, many years. We're still working things out.
hmm
It's still difficult at times. Um, I'm stubborn. They're stubborn. They're in their 80s, coming into the 90s.
Yeah.
Um, I've tried to make amends.
hmm
In the first book, I wrote a letter to them, and then sent them the book. And I've spoken to them a few times, and I send them cards, and I get phone calls from my dad on occasion. So yeah, we sort of rebuilding.
That's
Um,
good. Now, it's harder for older people to accept truth. So the books may have been a little bit hard for them to really take in, because it normally means that they have to address some truths that they've probably, you know, pushed back in the back of their mind, so that they don't have to think about not only the things that you went through, but some sorts of survivor's guilt, and the guilt that they have for the things that they feel responsible for, when in regards to you. So um that's one of those tough things. Like, I have a not so good relationship with my parents. My dad passed away in 2017, but before he passed away, it took for a lot of ironing out things, because he wasn't around a lot. And then when I got older, he started introducing me to siblings, and I'm thinking, like, well, why would you wait so long? So I understand that. So that's why it was kind of important for me to even ask you, how is it to have a family unit now? Because when you grow up displaced, or with those type of abandonment issues, having a family becomes like top priority. And well, it can either become a top priority and you really embrace it and give your family everything that you didn't have, or it can become a burden because you're not willing to face the things that were wrong in your upbringing and now you're running from it. So, and it's so crazy because even in me saying that, a lot of people run from their past and the things that if they addressed, it would make them a better person. But you didn't run. You stayed the course and you allowed God to show you the real version of you, the part of you that people didn't want you to see.
Yeah. Yeah. And the person that I didn't want people to see, I didn't want to be vulnerable. I didn't want to show vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm stubborn. I'm a northern man. I like to think I'm quite physically strong. I wasn't always that way, but you know, I learned to deal with feelings. I learned to deal with emotion, my own, which in turn helps me deal with other people's emotion.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not perfect by any shot in any sort of universal way. You know,
Stop, because that's not true. You are perfect. The thing is, a lot of times we are told we're not perfect to make everybody feel comfortable. When actually who you are, all of the flaws, all of the things that you could see or perceive as flaws, that's what makes you you. We don't need 50 million of the exact carbon copy of other people. We need every single thing that you've gone through, every single thing that you survived with, every single thing, not just gone through and then sulked in it, but you grew through it. So those
yeah.
things really make you the perfect version of you.
Oh, I understand that. I am sort of getting to the optimal version of me. I know that I am perfect to my heavenly Father. I know that. I'm not a perfect parent. I've got stepkids, and my youngest is 9, and
Do you
he's
do
got
better than what you had?
yeah. I mean, he's got behavioural problems, and I shout a bit too much, and
I mean, no, but
um,
that's a part of parent. Listen, every single child is different. This is the thing,
yeah,
like for real, for real. So it may be one child that you don't even have to yell at, you don't have to fuss. All you gotta do is a certain look, and they, oh my God, let me get it together. But then
that's
you
my
might
daughter.
have another child, especially like the second or third child. They are the ones that will try you. Look, they will. Oh, they drive you crazy because they try everything that the calm child won't try. And it's probably because the calm child is so calm that the other child is like, well, I'm going to try it. And so, and I'm saying that because I don't want you to think that fussing or yelling is bad. Sometimes
No,
you have to. Shit, sometimes you got to cuss at your children because they don't even listen until you say damn, shit, or fucking. And they're like, oh shit, we really in trouble now.
yeah, I do. I do know that there are better ways that I could,
Yeah, yeah.
learn to deal with these things. I do have minimal patience at times. I do snap when I probably shouldn't snap, which then winds the younger ones up. I know that they have neurodivergencies
Right.
themselves, um, you know, but so it winds me up, and then you get stuck in that sort of capillaric dance of reciprocity, and it's just, it just gets worse and worse and worse, and you just end up shouting at each other. But I love them, and they know that I love them. The youngest, I take him to school every day, and I tell him, no matter what sort of mood we've been in that morning, he always goes into his school door knowing that he's loved. I tell him that I love him every morning before he goes into school, so he knows that he's loved. I have this Deadpool bear that my wife bought me. Deadpool is my spirit animal, and it's a panda pool. Actually, we call him Eric, and Eric is the voice of reason in our house.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one that my boy speaks through. It's the one that I speak through when we're trying to calm him down. And I take Eric to school to pick him up from school every day. Much to the amusement of the other parents on the school run. A 6'1", 16.5 stone man with a stuffed bear in his coat. But that's the way that we deal with it. That's the way that we deal with emotions in our house. We with Freddie, we speak through Eric. It's how 9 times out of 10 it will calm him, and that's because that's the only way that we've found to calm him. And it brings a little bit of happiness to everybody else. It allows everybody in the house to contribute with a voice, part of that voice. It allows people to be silly. When there's birthdays or Christmas or, Mother's Day, Father's Day, he gets bought a newborn outfit, a t-shirt or some trousers, so so he's part of the family. You look for my Facebook, pretty much every photo with the kids has Eric in it, because that's the way that we've found, the common way that we found to be able to communicate. Communication is a very important tool. I didn't always know how to do it, and I still don't always know how to do it. I get a bit kerfuffled at times, and I get so angry that I don't know what to say. So being able to focus my voice into this character of Eric, and having everybody else be able to then communally focus their voice into it, it helps, and it's calming. I can't recommend it anymore. It's doing that. It's a fantastic.
Sounds very tool. Very healthy. It sounds like a very functional way to keep your family in communication and connected with each other. And that's very important. That's what really, really matters. So let me ask you, if there was anything that you could change about your life, would you change anything?
No.
That's good.
No. I've been through some stuff where most people never come out of. I've come out of, I've probably lived 1,000 lives. Many times I could have been dead, but I'm not. I always, when I first came into faith, I used to say, God, why do you do this to me? And I used to ask questions like, why, if God's a loving father, why, people say, oh, God never gives you too much more than you can handle. But when I started learning about my faith and I started learning about God, I learned that actually God does give you more than you can handle, because it teaches you to depend on him. And that's what I do. I live for God. We live on faith as a family. We don't have a lot of money come in. Our government isn't the best.
Listen, now I know what you mean when you say our government isn't the best, because ours isn't either. When you realize that it's a business, it makes it make sense, but it's not supposed to be ran like that. So let me ask you a question. What does freedom mean to you now? What would you say freedom means to you?
What does freedom mean to me now? Well, I guess freedom is connection for me. You see, addiction is disconnection from everything. It's disconnection from your life. It's, when I say I'm an addict, that doesn't mean that drugs are my problem, because, I'm an addict. Drugs aren't my problem. They're my solution. My problem is being able to deal with life and problems. So drugs were my solution, and drugs were a disconnection.
From
but
everything.
they were also a prison. And the thing about freedom from addiction and recovery and things like that is that it's reconnection. We are reconnected to our lives. We're reconnected to God. You know, I know what it's like to feel that God hates you so much he doesn't want you around. You know, I also went through a point where I couldn't hear God, and I thought he'd abandoned me. And I guess that's what godless is. You know, not being able to hear him, and that was the disconnection. And to be connected to God, to be connected to church, to be connected to a family, a wider family of choice, not by blood, to be connected in this way, to be able to connect with people over the things that I've done, or you know, some of the things that I've lived. You know, to be able to connect with the books or with the films, you know, or the podcasts, you know, and my own podcasts are coming on here and speaking to people like you. It's all about connection, and connection is freedom. Because when you're disconnected, you're in a prison, and there's no worse prison than your own head. So, yeah, freedom for me is the ability to connect on any level. I love doing this. I absolutely adore doing this. You know, one day I could be speaking to someone in, Australia. You know, I did one in Australia the other day. I did one in Bangkok a few days before that. I'm speaking to you. Are you Las Vegas, Nevada?
No, in Atlanta, Georgia.
Atlanta, Georgia. You know, I speak to a lot of people from that sort of area. A lot of people from the Bible Belt as well. You know, that amazed me actually, because you know, our hospitals, you can't even speak about your faith. You can wear a cross, but you can't show it. Yeah, I've spoken to people from my Atlanta and you know, other places that have prayed with their doctors.
It's a plastic surgeon here that prays before every single patient he does surgery on.
Wow, that's
mind blowing.
Yeah, that is mind blowing. It is for me. So every decision that I make, you know I have the freedom to do what I want, but I choose to let God guide it. So everyone that I invite on my podcast, I pray about. And if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. You know, it will go swimmingly. If it's not, sometimes it's it's like the traffic light system. Sometimes it's red light, which means no. Sometimes it's an amber light, which means maybe, not the right
proceed
time.
with caution.
Yeah. And sometimes it's a green light. And just as I pray for everyone that I get asked to come on, you know, I think prayer is a important part of a healthy life, whether you're a religious person, a Christian person or not, because prayer puts you in a place of humbleness. It puts you in a place where you can just be able to manifest things.
If you could give advice to somebody right now, what advice would you give them?
Keep fighting. It may feel like you're losing this battle. It may feel like you're not loved. It may feel like that God doesn't love you. It may feel like your life is falling apart. It may feel like you've gone further than any rock bottom that you could ever do. It may feel like the world is against you. It may feel like God is against you. The Satan is against you. It gets better. It does get better, and there is hope. There is always hope. You know, you are loved. You are wanted. You're not a bother to anybody. If you need to speak to someone, speak to someone, and don't go through this alone. Because Satan likes to separate you from God. He likes you to be alone because that's when he can attack you more. So you are loved by God and you're loved by me. You know, and there is a way out. There is always a way out, and there is always hope. Even when you feel hopeless, you know, those first four letters, HOPE, there is always hope in hopelessness.
Okay, so tell us where we can find you and where we can get your books at.
So you can find my website at jwgreg.wordpress.com. It's where you can, look in the tabs for the Live and Undrugged, and that's where you can find my podcast. So you can find my films on there, or some of my films on there. You can find out all about me and the work that I've done. There's a blog on there. You can read some of that. This is where once this is released, this will go as well on the front page where people can watch all the podcasts I speak on. My books can be found at Amazon. All you need to do is type in Jack W Gregory. My first book is a poetic memoir called The Personal Apocalypse, The Poetic Ramblings of a Troubled Man. And in there, it's the stories of my life, some of the poetry that I've written through my life, and some of the anecdotes around the poetry and prose. The second book is called Between the Streetlights and Red Lights, Escaping Human Trafficking, Sexual Slavery and Exploitation. This sells quite well over in America, especially on ebook. It's available ebook, which is in Britain $2.99, I think. So still not very expensive in America. It's not an easy read. Not an easy read. There's a lot of wisdom in there. There's a lot of stories in there. But there's a lot of hope in there. I don't mince my words. I tell it how it is. That's one promise that I made to everybody that helped supply their stories. Some of them are written as letters. Some are written as poetry. Some are written as prose. And some are written as just like basic documents. It's how they want to do it. But there's also information in here on where to get help, on how to spot traffickers, on how to spot anyone that you might think is being involved in trafficking. There's a little bit about grooming in there, and how to arm yourself against that. My latest book called Run Don't Walk, which will hopefully be out in the next couple of months, is about escaping domestic violence and abuse, and in that I have done a full chapter on grooming, and how to spot the groomers toolkit, and how to arm yourself, and know what you're looking at online or in person. The foreword was written by my friend Jason Edwards, who I said earlier is a hostage and barricade negotiator. He also has written a best-selling book about narcissism and manipulation called Monsters Among Us. And he exposes the toolkits of these people and these narcissists. So yeah, that will be available on Amazon within the next couple of months as well. But there is a page that if you go on the website, if you go onto the shop, you can then go onto the Amazon page through there. I believe you could get the souvenir films on it, things like Apple TV or Google Play and things like that, Google Movies, and all the other stuff. I believe they're on the Oxygen network.
So, okay, before we go, are you able to give us a quick monologue?
Yeah.
I want to see what you got. We're gonna put it out there for you.
Yeah. Okay. I sometimes do this. Let's see. Here we go. Okay, so before I got, well, when I got sober, and actually before I got sober for this time, I'd had a breakdown and I was getting a little better, and I was having a relationship with my daughter. She was only about 4 at the time. I was staying in the spare room of a guy, and where I could have her for the weekend. And I'd come out of this particularly monstrous breakdown, in which I tried to punch my ex-wife's door through, solid oak door. And we were at the park, and I was just sat there with a pen and paper, watching her play. And I don't know why I picked up the pen and paper and put it in my bag, but I did. And I was just sat there, and I wrote this poem. It's called Playground Battleground. It kind of explains how I was feeling at the time, and it kind of looks a little bit into my mental illness, and actually it shows that there is hope there, when you come out of it, and it's about what happened at the playground. So I'll do that. The sun shining, burning brightly on this gentle July afternoon. Heat kisses the back of my neck, yet the slow, soft summer breeze cools the skin on my aging face, and it feels nice. So nice. So there I sit silently, my gaze fixed upon her beauty, and she dances to the playful tune of childhood, skipping, laughing. She, away on her travels, her imagination working overtime, having an adventure in her own personal wonderland. So I wear a look of pride upon my face, a look every doting father will wear. Playground now full, other children joyfully playing to their own childhood songs as their parents look upon them with a similar gaze to my own. So I smile. Yet as she plays alone, and sadness begins to haze my view. Yet she smiles, and I wonder why. Her playful spirit now interrupted as she is taken away from her wonderland in one fleeting moment, as she rushes to the aid of an injured child. To her, in her mind, is an injured comrade fallen in the battle of the playground war. Wounded. His knee grazed, he shaking, crying, filled with fear, and she, ever caring. Her instincts overtakes, and she looks upon her fallen friend with the same loving stare I've seen so many times before, the same loving look she gave her father all too many times before. It's empathy personified, her words wise, reassuring, calming, and healing comes, as it always does, as she smiles. His crying now a gentle sob as his fear begins to subside. She's so old for one so young. As she gazes lovingly at his tear-stained, dirty face, her smile turns to a grin, and she softly says, "Wanna play?" She takes him by the hands, friends now for the lifetime of her stay in the playground battleground, knowing in reality she may never see him again, or when Daddy will take her home. Yet she smiles, and I still wonder why. So there I sit silently, peacefully, for the first time in a long time, filled with pride. And once again, I feel nice. And it's so nice to feel nice.
Yay! Hold on, I got some cheers, some hand claps, but I don't know if I'm gonna push it right, so I'm scared to put it on. But that was so beautiful. Again, Jack, I am so excited for your story. I'm so enthralled with just your ambitious determination. It is a trait that a lot of people don't have. You are very talented, you're very smart, but you're also very humble and you're growing. And I just want to thank you again for being on Journey to Freedom. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Until next time, folks, that is the end of the show.
Hi, I'm Kaci, Dr. Kaci. Welcome to Speaking Freedom. We are happy to have you, and we hope that we are able to help you in every way possible. Have a good evening. If you've enjoyed this video, like, share, subscribe, and turn on your notifications. New episode every Friday.